All right, got it. Now we are great. Well, we're live, Greg. This is Noreen at the Healthy Peaceful Podcast. And today I have a wonderful guest, Greg Stein, also known as Poornamurti. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Noreen.
Awesome. And I know we're today going to be talking about Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology, and specifically about a new project that you started, a lunar calendar, and we'll get into the weeds with that in just a few moments. But I'd just like to take a moment and get a sense of your background, how you became interested in Vedic astrology, Jyotish, Yoga Vedanta, a little bit about your path.
Sure. Well, initially I became interested in yoga in 2005, and I started taking classes, traditional yoga classes. And through yoga, I learned about Ayurveda, actually. And a friend of mine many years ago, maybe it was about 2012, was studying Ayurveda and kept telling me about Vedic astrology. And she actually sent me these DVDs about Vedic astrology, Jyotisha, and I started watching them, and I had my chart printed out, And what I was learning in the little video excerpts, I started looking at my chart and analyzing it, using what I was learning, and I started noticing that things that were in my chart had actually happened in my life. Very significant events were unmistakably indicated in my chart. So I became kind of fascinated, and that's really what got me interested in Vedic astrology. And I started studying in 2013, and I've really just been really delving into it ever since then. And I've been giving consultations now for quite a few years, as well as offering tutoring in Vedic astrology.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Greg. And I know that you have developed a calendar, and specifically you refer to, it's a Vedic calendar, and we're going to be looking at 1 month in that Vedic, the Jyotish calendar, September. And specifically, you mentioned the term Muhurta. Could you tell our listeners and viewers what that is, what that means, how that's important in the chart?
So Muhurta is a Sanskrit word which basically means a moment in time. And in astrology, the basic concept that underlies most of the branches of astrology is that when something is begun, that moment that something commences is important. And so the cosmic patterns, the patterns that are created in that moment by the planets, where they are in the zodiac, the rising sign, all the patterns, those macrocosmic patterns, at that moment that something's commenced, reflects how that event will unfold. So, for example, even in natal chart astrology, we're using a chart that's mapping the planets and where they are, and what constellations they're in, what the rising constellation is, etc. All these different things, it's mapping that out for the moment a life was begun, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the birth chart is just a map of the cosmic patterns at the beginning of someone's life. And so that moment reflects how that life will unfold. So similarly, we can actually cast a chart for the beginning of anything to understand how it will unfold. So let's say I decide to go on a journey. I want to travel to Europe. The moment I leave my home, that's the beginning of my journey. So I can look at a chart for that moment and I can understand something about how that journey will unfold. So even the moment of meeting someone for the first time, you can understand how will your interaction or relationship with that person unfold over time. You can predict.
That's what I was going to ask, that the term and the concept of Muhurta, a moment in time, essentially you're going to be using this for, I don't want to use the word predictive because that seems maybe a little bit overreaching, but maybe thinking about an auspicious time to start that journey that you talked about.
Exactly. So we have this concept that you can look at a chart at the moment something begins to understand how it will unfold. And so Muhurta, otherwise known as electional astrology, is sort of the English term for that, is simply using that principle proactively. So if I know that the chart of a moment something begins will reflect how that unfolds, I can then look and see, well, when does the chart show, in the case of a journey, when do the factors in the chart show indications that would indicate a successful or relatively smooth, harmonious experience? And let's say, okay, I look over the course of the next couple of weeks and the best day is, Friday of next week. And so if practically speaking, I'm able to leave on Friday, then I can make that choice. And it's kind of like catching wind behind your sails, when you're kind of aligning with the greater macrocosm. And the idea is
where when you are aligning, that there's a sense of receiving support from nature.
Yes.
Like you said, the wind, the wind is at your sails, and that things are more effortless.
Yeah. The idea is you're kind of in the flow of things. You're aligning your microcosmic experience with the greater macrocosm. It's kind of like a simple analogy I like to use is, let's say you want to go on a picnic or go for a hike. You look at the weather forecast, and if you can, you prefer probably to choose a day where it's a comfortable temperature, where it's not raining.
Sure.
And sometimes you can't choose just the right day. And in that case, you bring your umbrella. It's not like a calamity, right? So
yeah, and it's yeah, it's if you have a choice, you're going to pick the better day, the better forecast. So it's very similar to that.
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy. And so you can see, okay, if you choose that sunny day for your picnic rather than a gray day, if you can, it improves the experience. It doesn't mean you can't go on a picnic on a gray day and still have a good time.
Right.
Yeah.
But you prefer not to be going in the middle of a downpour. Yeah,
exactly. So I like that analogy a lot, because sometimes when people learn about Muhurta, they get a little bit
do they become rigid?
They can become rigid, or they can become even anxious about if they have to do something and the astrology doesn't look good.
Right.
And so it's important to understand, when we're looking at this science of Muhurta, that we're using it to, hopefully improve our quality of life,
Yeah.
when we can. And so I feel it's really important. Sometimes practically, we just the only day we can do something is, on the day before the best day, and then
Sure,
we
sure.
just go along with it. It's not a big concern.
Right. Exactly. So we're not going to use this to really control our lives, but it's just essentially to enhance our lives.
Yeah, it's a guide that gives us maybe some information we didn't previously have.
Okay.
And if we, it's one factor alongside all the other practical considerations of life
Sure.
that we can factor in
Okay.
when possible for our benefit. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, the calendar, essentially, you're bringing this into play to really talk about the usefulness of certain days or the usefulness of certain events and limitations. Do you want to pull up the calendar and we can start looking at that and looking into the specifics?
Sure.
Of how it can be used as a tool?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So it's an interesting calendar because it's really mostly based on the moon, and I call it a Tajika lunar calendar. It describes it pretty well. And just a brief background about it, Tajika is actually a Sanskrit word that means Persian or Arabic. And so the techniques that the calendar is mostly based on are astrological.
Hold on for a second, Greg.
Sure.
Hold on for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I need to put the volume down on YouTube.
Sure.
Okay, we're good now. I forgot to close that window. Sorry about that, but we still are recording on YouTube Live. What does that word mean, Greg? The Tajika, is that the correct pronunciation?
Tajika.
Tajika. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the meaning of that.
Yeah. So Tajika is Sanskrit for Persian or Arabic, and basically the techniques that this calendar is mostly based on are Tajika. It's certain techniques that originated in Persia or in Arabic culture in their astrology. And at some point it was, through trade and different, travel, and historically those techniques made their way to India, and they were preserved in India, and they became so widely accepted and respected as valid techniques of astrology that they really took root in India and are used by many Vedic astrologers. So that's a little bit of the history of it. The same techniques also went west and greatly influenced the Western tradition of astrology. So a lot of these techniques are actually, you'll find there's a lot of overlap between Western and Vedic astrology, which is interesting.
So the word Tajika, that's, you said it comes from Persia?
Exactly.
And it's a technique that does, how does it enhance or contribute?
So it's based on the concept of applying and separating aspects. So
Okay.
like we'll see this chart, the calendar is based on, for example, when the moon is moving towards a harmonious aspect with another planet.
I see. I see. Okay.
So
So
it's
you're going to be looking at the lunar cycle when there's harmony that's occurring,
exactly.
and also when it's less harmonious.
Yeah, when there's more
Great.
obstruction.
Okay.
So that's the gist of it. The main thing with just understanding where the technique comes from, it's originally a Persian or Arabic method.
Right. And you also talk about, I like the kind of the narrative that you included in the first page or the first 2 pages of the calendar. You talk about how the moon itself represents the general flow of events.
That's correct.
Could you elaborate on that and what you mean by that?
Yeah, so the moon is unique in the sense that of all the planets that we use in astrology, the moon moves the fastest through the zodiac, much faster than any other planet, about 13 degrees a day, approximately. And the moon is always moving forward. And the moon also represents, water. Think of like the ocean. The moon's a very watery planet. So this constantly moving forward through the zodiac, the moon really represents the flow, we could say, right? In general, if you get that kind of sense of it. So the different aspects the moon makes as she's moving through the zodiac, it represents the flow of events. So if you look at the chart of a Muhurta, let's say a journey, and you look at what are the aspects the moon will perfect, the moon will create with other planets, within the next day or so, that will tell you something about just the general unfoldment. So the idea is...
That's interesting that you use the words, they're all F words. The moon is the fastest, it moves forward, and it represents flow.
Yeah, it is interesting.
And this being the lunar calendar, and is there a particular reason why you decided to do a lunar calendar other than what you just described?
The moon is, the most important factor in a muhurta is actually the ascendant and the lord of the ascendant. Whatever planet rules the ascendant. Now, that's a little technical, but the thing is that changes every 2 hours. The rising sign will change every 2 hours, approximately. And so, well, that's important to consider, if you were really going to go into detail for a very important event and want to get every little detail, aligned as best you can, you would look at that. But the moon is like a what we call a co-significator. So the moon is also very important, but it's constant in its importance. It doesn't change. If a chart has...
unlike when there's a particular planet that's is aspecting, you said every 2 hours in the chart, the moon is always the rhythms and the cycles in the moon are a constant.
Are always important, whereas other things in the chart change too quickly to map out in a way that's accessible for everybody.
Sure, without getting into like a full Jyotish reading.
Right. So it's a good, basically looking at the moon is a very good first step for selecting a harmonious time
Okay.
astrologically. It's a good and it's an accessible first step.
Awesome. And I know that you have this calendar where it's color coded.
Mhm.
You've got your green days and your blue days. So, oh, here we are at the calendar. Why don't you, spend a little time just going into the weeds on this and telling our viewers a little bit about how this is beneficial, how they can utilize it.
Absolutely. So the basic gist of it is green indicates times that are favorable, and blue indicates times to avoid when possible. And the calendar is meant to be used for things of minor importance, for beginning things of minor importance, right? Like, I have some examples actually in the.
Yeah, that would be great. If we look at a particular example. Yeah.
So let's say
Well,
there's some kind of. Mhm.
let's actually look at something that's not like a marriage or a birth, but let's look at something like a job, setting up a time or setting up a date for an important job interview.
Yeah. Yeah. So the idea is the
Would
calendar.
that fit within the realm of the scope of how this could be useful?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
think so. The calendar is not meant to be used for things of major importance, like a marriage, surgery, maybe beginning a new job, anything that's really a major life event. The calendar, because it's showing, a small handful of simple factors, not looking into all the details.
Sure.
It's meant really to be used lightly for meetings, maybe an important conversation. If, let's say you have a conflict with someone at work and you really want to sit down and talk about it and work things out, or, then.
Sure. So thinking about when's a good time to schedule that meeting.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Or, um, maybe a party or lighter things of minor importance.
Sure. Of lesser significance.
Yeah, where it's important
Okay.
enough where you want to pay some attention to it.
Sure.
Mhm.
Okay.
So let's say we want to hold a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So then this calendar shows all the days of the month. The green, anywhere you see green, it's more favorable. Anywhere you see blue, it's better to avoid. And you'll notice there's some different things here. There's the bar on top. And so the green and blue bars are indicating basically what the moon's doing in terms of the aspects it's applying to. It's moving towards perfecting an aspect with another planet. And so the
Okay.
green means that aspect is harmonious.
Mm-hmm.
And the blue means that aspect could be more challenging and show some obstacles.
All right.
So every
And
day.
is there a reason why, like for instance, in this particular one, the green Wednesday, the first at the top of the calendar, the green is in the middle versus Friday, the blue is on the right side of the day on the third. So is there a reason why it's positioned that way?
Yeah, so see how each day is divided into 4
I
sections
see.
with these little lines.
Yeah. Right.
So that's actually dividing the day into 4 6-hour periods.
Okay.
So like this is, midnight to 6 a.m.,
Right.
6 a.m. to noon,
Right.
noon to 6 p.m.,
Yeah.
6 p.m. to midnight.
Okay.
So the bar is showing you, for example, on this day, it's showing you it's a green bar from about 7:02 until about 6 p.m.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
So if you wanted to have your meeting, you would want to have it within that time frame.
I see. Okay.
Here it's showing, it's blue from 4:12 until midnight. So that would be a time to avoid.
Avoid that meeting with your boss
Yeah.
to resolve the conflict.
Yeah, yeah, whatever it is, or maybe that's wouldn't be the time to ask for a raise,
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because
Right.
might not work, or you might not get as good a raise. I don't know.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
He's okay. So that's cool. So it's
Yeah.
so the green and the blue, the top bars are, you said, where the moon is aspecting with a particular planet, which is causing the favorable or less favorable
Yeah.
color coding. And
So
what about
something
the
commenced.
shading?
Yeah,
What
just
about
to
the
add. So
shading in the box? Yeah.
yeah, so the idea is you would want to just to reiterate, you would want to commence something during the time when you see a green bar, and you would want to avoid commencing something as far as possible when you can, when you see a blue bar. The shading, either green or blue, is looking at some other factors that are some of those factors are related to the moon. In other ways, some of the factors are other things are taken into account. It's a little bit too complex to fully explain today, but it's showing like so this green zone where it's also, there's a bar on top and there's also shading about from 7:02 to noon. It's showing that there's additional favorable factors.
Okay, so if you have the green bar and the green shading in the same time slot, that's that's the best you can get.
That's the best. Yeah. So
But then if you have a green bar but no green shading, it's still good, but it's not quite as ideal.
right, it's
All
good.
right.
So
Yeah.
like this period of time is good,
Right.
but this period of time is even better.
Okay. Sure. Sure.
And then now this blue shading, for various reasons, like here it's shaded in all the, this whole number of days, about almost 6 days, because that's when the moon is dark and waning, or it's just started waxing, but it's still very dark.
Okay.
And so that's one reason why there's some blue shading. In other areas, there's blue shading for other reasons. I've just taken into account other factors. And so let's say Thursday, this whole day, there's some general unfavorability because the moon's dark and waning. But then
Okay.
this period of time, Friday after 4:12 a.m., that's, especially unfavorable, where you'd want to, there's even more reason to avoid that time if you can.
Sure.
So similarly, this on the 16th here, from about 3 a.m. until noon, that time's unfavorable. But from about noon to 7:38 p.m., that time's
More
more
unfavorable.
unfavorable. Yeah.
Okay. Or less favorable, even less favorable. Okay.
Yeah. And so the
All right.
basic thing is, with these colors, favor and avoid, sometimes you see more of the color, and that just means it's more favorable or unfavorable. So the more of the color, the more it's illustrating a kind of, it's giving a little bit more weight to that idea.
Sure. And I noticed some of the blue bars are, it seems to me that the blue, is there a reason why some of them are like on the 10th, it's particularly, the bar seems wider or bluer? Is there any reason for that?
There is a reason for that.
Okay.
And yeah, generally, if the bar is wider, And there could, hypothetically, there isn't this month, but there could be a green bar that's wider at some
Sure.
point. And that would
Yeah.
mean, again, this idea of more favorable or more unfavorable.
Okay, so it'd be even more. Okay.
Yeah.
All
And,
right.
sometimes things are mixed. Like,
I'm looking up on Saturday, the 4th, you have a blue bar and a green bar running concurrently
yeah. So this shows
at the
there's
very end of the
mixed.
day. So it's a mixed, okay.
Yeah. It's a time where there's some favorable things happening
I
astrologically,
see.
and there's some unfavorable things. And so,
Okay.
yeah,
Maybe that you might need more guidance to before you started something during that time.
yeah. But I think it also gives you a sense of, let's say I had to do something on the 4th.
Sure.
If I didn't have a choice, well, then it's better to wait until, this time as opposed
Right.
to this time.
Okay. All right.
Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah. The other thing to notice is that sometimes there's no color. And so
Yes.
that's simply
Yeah.
more neutral.
Okay.
So
So
it's
it's
not
neither
showing,
good, it's neither good nor bad. It's just, it's not gonna, you're not necessarily gonna get the support of nature, but it's not, um, you know, super negative to start something at that period.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. And tell me about what you have written in the boxes. Is that like Moon in Gemini I'm looking at the first. Tell me a little bit about what your notations mean, how I can read them. How are they useful?
Yeah. So there is a key in one of the previous pages. I'll just show that real quick here.
Sure.
So people can, if they're looking at the recording, they could pause it and take a screen cap if they want to.
Yep.
And I'll go back to the calendar and explain a little bit. So yeah, these like MO is just an abbreviation for moon, and then the different planets are abbreviated, like Mercury here, Sun, Venus, Mars. And then the 3-letter abbreviations are for the constellations. So that's exactly right. So mostly what is shown in the boxes is what constellation the moon's in, according to the Vedic system, which uses the sidereal, what's called the sidereal zodiac.
Okay.
Showing, where the moon is in the zodiac, and then it's showing what aspect, what kind of Tajika aspect the moon is making with other planets and when. And so what's written here are the details that forms the basis of what's shown in the color coding. So
okay, so this is how you've created the color coding. This is the basis for the color coding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, especially the bars.
I see.
And so these are just the details for astrologers or people who have learned enough to understand what it means, where they can see, sort of why is that green or why is that blue? They see what's happening astrologically.
I see.
But
now,
you don't need to.
I was going to say, for someone who doesn't necessarily, have any real in-depth understanding of Vedic astrology of Jyotish, they're there, but they don't have to focus on them. Is that they can look at the colors and they can stop there if they want to. It's still very useful in that regard.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
The color coding really shows you all you need to know to use the calendar.
All right.
And these are just the details, for people who are interested in, looking into the details a little bit.
Sure. Why don't you take us through one of the days and take us through the details. I just am interested to hear a little bit more about how that works. And some people may be interested in that.
Sure. So let's say I want to have that meeting. And so I'm looking for a green day.
A good time to have a meeting with your boss.
Yeah. And let's say I ask my boss, well, when are you available?
Sure.
And we're looking on this week here between the 20th and the 24th on that work week.
Okay.
And so he says, well, I'm available Monday morning.
Mhm.
I'm available Tuesday around lunchtime. I'm available Wednesday morning.
Mhm.
Those are the times he's available.
Okay, so you have 3 time slots to choose from.
Yeah. And so I look at Monday and I say, nope, I don't want to do that one because it's blue.
It's blue all the way through. There isn't even, there's no break in blue. We're looking at the top
Yeah.
bar, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you can see now, if I want to understand, well, why is it blue?
Yeah.
Then I look down here and I look at, well, what's in blue down here?
Okay.
See how that's blue?
Yes.
So the reason why it's blue is because the moon is approaching an opposition to the sun.
I see. I see.
And it's within orb of the sun. There's a particular orb it has with the sun from the previous day, 4:58 p.m., all the way until actually 16:55, and then there's something else happening later on. So it continues because after 4:55 p.m., the moon will be moving to oppose Mars.
Okay.
So basically, we can see why it's blue. When the moon is in opposition to, Mars or Saturn or the sun, that's unfavorable.
Okay. All right.
And it's within a certain range of degrees, certain orb.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Sure. And so moon is approaching the sun and at 4:55. Is that correct? That's how I'd read that?
Correct. Yeah. And then
Right.
the reason why it's still blue is because it will, even at that point, it will be
Mars,
within orb.
it's with Mars is the moon is approaching Mars, and that they overlap at 4:02
Yeah.
a.m.
Yeah.
or
And so
p.m. Excuse me.
that's
Of the
AM
prior
actually.
day. Oh, a.m. Okay,
The next day, moon opposite Mars at 4:02. So once 4:02 happens and that aspect is created, it's sort of perfected at that time, then the moon's moving away from it. So it's kind of like in the past, which is why after 4:02, it's no longer blue.
It's clear. Okay.
Yeah, because that aspect is now in the past, and it shows nothing, unfavorable happening coming up.
Sure. Okay. And then you also have on the 20th, is that the moon in Pisces at would that be not 7:21 essentially?
It's actually, that's 9:21 a.m.
9:21. Okay, a.m. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
And that's, you said, the constellation.
Correct.
Is that playing into it all, the blue coloring at all, or the shading or anything at all here?
It doesn't. The only time that the moon, via being in a constellation, would give a kind of shading, according to how I'm doing the calendar, is when the moon's in Scorpio. I'll shade it blue because the moon is what we call debilitated in Scorpio, so it becomes quite weak there. So that's the only time where the constellation will actually influence the color coding here.
Okay, so it's really the aspect.
Yeah, it's really the aspect that is more important in this calendar.
And again, just to reiterate, it's the moon aspecting with the planets.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Why don't you give our viewers another example of, just another example where the calendar would be useful and how you would utilize it?
Yeah. Well, just to kind of complete that thought. So,
Sure.
we had the three choices, either the 20th, 21st, or the 22nd.
Right.
If we'll choose the morning of the 22nd.
Okay. All
Because
right.
that's green, there's no blue.
It's green. Right. There's no blue, and that's great. So
Yeah. And we can see the
awesome.
reason why is because the moon is approaching a sextile with Jupiter, very harmonious. That's a very harmonious aspect.
I see.
Yeah.
And the star is a sextile?
That's right. Yeah. Below
Right.
here you can see the
key.
the key, what it means.
Right. Okay.
The Tajika aspects are the same as all the major Western Ptolemaic aspects.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So now you've had a successful meeting with your boss. And now your wife's going to have some dental treatment, which
Okay.
it's not serious, but when might be, if I were looking at this and, she asks, pretend I'm her husband, and she asks me, when's a good time to schedule this? Would I be really just, is it the green, blue, or is there anything else that's going to pop out at me?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I wouldn't choose this for any major surgery, but if it was something minor, then I would just try to choose a time where there's the most green. So ideally,
Sure. Okay.
green bar and green shading, if you can.
Right. Okay.
And where you don't see any blue. So,
Sure. Okay.
the 15th
All right.
looks good for the whole, working hour day. The 17th looks pretty good anytime
Is a
after
good day as well.
7:45.
Okay.
The 25th is good. It's better, in the first half of the day approximately. Anytime on the 29th. So the idea is the calendar gives you hopefully an easy, see how easy that is? It's my hope that it's easy.
Yeah. No, it's very easy. I'm really, if I really want to optimize, I'm looking for green bar and green shading.
Correct. Yeah.
If I've exhausted all the opportunities for that, then I'm looking for, the next would be the green bar, and after that would be the green shading.
Correct.
In terms of the favorability of starting things, because we're talking about here about commencing things.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the
Which
important
is the
point.
Muhurta.
Yeah, that's the important point. Is the idea is you want to commence something at that time.
Right.
So it could even be, let's say you want to start writing an article.
Sure.
So you could start writing it, even if you just write a paragraph.
Oh yeah, it's the starting. Say a little bit more about that. It's really the starting.
Yeah. So let's say I want to write an article. It's going to take me maybe a week, depending on how long it is. It could take however long it takes. It doesn't matter. But the time to start writing it would be green. So let's say, okay, I want to write an article. I'll start writing it on the 15th when it's green bar and green shading within that time frame. Right. And then you can continue it, without worrying about whether it's green or blue. The important moment has already begun, which is the beginning of the event.
Okay. Now I'm looking at this week, and of course, today doesn't look all that hot. Tomorrow doesn't look all that great. So should I just hang out in my house?
So that's a good question. It's important to understand that, routine things that we do every day going grocery shopping, going for a walk, all
Right.
these things, they don't require looking into
Right. Yeah. It's
Muhurta.
okay. Right.
But this
Okay.
is, when we're starting something, when we're beginning something that
Sure.
we that's a little bit important,
Is
important
of
enough.
minor importance.
Yeah, minor importance.
Okay.
So I'm not going to worry about green or blue for all the normal routine things that I do every day or every week.
Mm-hmm.
Going
Okay.
grocery shopping, going for a walk, just casually hanging out with friends, or you know doing normal work stuff.
Sh-
All
Sure.
those things, just I would encourage people, just be natural with that. Just, there's no need
Okay.
to refer to this calendar for those kinds of
Sure.
things.
Well, let's say I didn't know about this calendar, or I forgot to look at it. And today I had, which is Labor Day, so it's kind of unusual, but I had a very important job interview, or a meeting that was going to lead to an offer of a position. Because
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not an official interview, but there were possibilities there. Now, in Ayurveda and Vastu and other Vedic systems, we think about remedies.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's blue today, so I'm thinking, oh wow, I shouldn't have timed that for today. Is there any remedy? Because I want to. This has got to be, kickoff powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Anything I can do after the fact?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there are certain things that you can do to offset it. I think in terms of Muhurta, when we can, we always like to choose a good Muhurta for.
So yeah, even we know that the Muhurta is the choosing and the commencement and the point in time.
Yeah, but the reality is we don't always have the choice.
Right.
And so sometimes that in some ways reflects an almost like predestined, like a kind of like, I can read actually a quote. There's this wonderful book on Muhurta.
Oh, yeah. And who's the author? Muhurta, Traditional and Modern, by K.K. Joshi. Yeah, I'll include that in the show notes.
Yeah. So first of all, to answer your question briefly, is that you can always do potentially some chanting or prayer.
I was thinking about mantra.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I think a general thing that you can do to help remove obstacles would be chanting for Ganesha.
Okay.
And so that would be what I would generally recommend.
Sure.
If you have to do something that's kind of important, during an unfavorable time, you can do some chanting for Ganesha to help remove obstacles.
And would you do that after or before, or does it matter?
I would do before if possible.
Okay.
But I think you can still do after. I think it could still be helpful. But in chapter 16 of this book, it's kind of my favorite book on Muhurta. He has all these case studies where he studies Muhurtas. Many of them weren't actually chosen intentionally, but for example, a Muhurta that a politician was sworn into office, and how their term went.
Sure. Yeah. So he plays it out. He plays it out.
Yeah. So he looks at the astrology, he looks at what happened and how the astrology reflects what happened.
Okay.
And his conclusion in the chapter is, one thing is very clear, that is, whether the Muhurta is selected by the person or imposed on him by destiny, it always...
That's the interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So whether it's chosen by the person or imposed on him by destiny, it always reflects the fate of any activity commencing in that muhurta, in that moment.
Right. Mm.
So sometimes life only gives us, the wrong choice, so to speak.
Yeah, we may not be presented, or we don't have time. We have to make a decision quickly. We don't have time to consult the calendar.
Yeah,
Or
and in that
somebody's
case,
expecting an immediate response, whatever, or we might lose the opportunity if we don't respond immediately.
yeah, and in that case, I think in some ways, the biggest remedy is trusting the universe.
I love that. I love
Let,
that.
let's say the only day given to me for that job interview is the 6th. It's unfavorable. And we can predict based on the calendar, there's a chance that the person won't get the job. There's the astrology suggests that, there could
I
be
see.
other things, but we can kind of say, well, maybe they won't get a job, or if they do, they won't end up sticking with the job. It won't be the right one for them.
Sure.
It's possible that that's the case. But the important thing to remember is that, things happen for a reason. So we can't always see the bigger picture, but maybe it was the best possible outcome for us in the long run to not get that job. It's just an example. I'm not
Yeah. It
saying,
could see. It may be something that you thought was going to be in your best interest, and was a great opportunity, but in fact, there's a better opportunity or a different direction that you're better suited for.
right. So
And that's the trusting the universe.
exactly. So whatever happens,
Yeah.
trusting the universe, and when you really kind of go more deeply into it, like in the yoga tradition, for example, they say that things are always happening for the best. So even when something goes wrong or is difficult, we can't understand always why, but it's ultimately for our highest good.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense as well, really, all that's happening astrologically is always favorable in the kind of highest sense, right?
Yeah, because it's always for our greater good. Even
Yeah,
though in the moment, though in the moment it doesn't appear that way.
yeah, it's like,
And when you say for our greater good from a Jyotish perspective, are you specifically referring to our evolutionary capacity as souls, or?
yeah, I think so, that when things don't happen in a way that's smooth or easy or agreeable to us based on our own expectations or desires, right? Those are actually the experiences that can be the best for our growth.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's kind of like if we come back to that analogy with the picnic, well, we wouldn't like to go on a picnic when it's pouring rain, but rain's a good thing in a lot of ways,
Sure.
right? So I mentioned that to say, yes, we use the calendar to the extent we can, when we can,
Yeah.
but for these instances where life unfolds in a way that's just beyond our control, or we don't seem to be given a choice, then we just have to trust and understand that there's a higher plan unfolding, and it's ultimately for the best, even if it's not as smooth a ride, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a really, really great way to look at it. see if there's anything else that I wanted to ask about calendar. For the book, okay. Tool. So you covered using it lightly and activities of minor importance. So for major activities, why don't you give an example of 3 major activities that you think maybe you should delve a little deeper than just consulting the calendar.
Yeah. So, the calendar is a simple tool and it is useful. But by virtue of its simplicity, it has its limitations. So that's the idea. I want people who may use this calendar to understand that very clearly. So for things like, major events like a marriage, maybe starting a business that someone intends to maintain for some years, maybe a major surgery. Those would be 3 examples of events where just looking at this calendar is not enough. If you want to, have a Muhurta set for that, it's better to consult an astrologer who will look at all of the nitty-gritty details, including many of the things potentially that the calendar is showing as one factor, right?
Of course, yeah.
But there are factors that just cannot be represented.
Yeah, it's not going to be represented in a calendar or
in a simple calendar.
It's not going to be this simplistic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that you also said, one of the things you said in the calendar actually is that the premise of the calendar is that some astrological awareness is bound to be of benefit.
Exactly. When I created the calendar, I was honestly feeling a little bit I had mixed feelings about it because, like I said, there's a lot of factors that are just not possible to map out in an accessible way. And so, well, what if someone chooses a green time and then there's some other factor that is not as ideal that, the calendar just cannot convey.
Of course.
And so I had, these kind of mixed feelings. Well, then is it worth sharing this or not? And the more I thought about it, and I've also discussed it with, other astrologers and whatnot, and the more I thought about it is, well, some astrological awareness is better than none.
Okay.
And so over time, you're at least choosing. You can feel sure that the green times there's going to be some supportive, favorable factor. Okay. Whereas if you just picked any old time without looking at the astrology, there's just the factors that the calendar doesn't take into account. There's just as much of a chance that those could be unfavorable, just kind of random chance that way.
Sure.
So over time, I'll try to summarize that idea maybe more simply. For little things, if you use the calendar over time, it's going to boost the average favorability of all those little things. Okay,
so there's benefit there. There's some benefit to be derived. That's awesome. And Greg, I know that you are a teacher both of Sanskrit and Vedic astrology. And you also do personal consultations. Where can our viewers find you? Oh, I think we lost each other. Well, this is Noreen at the Healthy Peaceful Podcast. I believe we lost Greg, but you can find him for consultations on Jyotish, Vedic Astrology, at Vedic Healing 108.com is his website. And I want to thank Greg. His calendar will be available. Oh, here's Greg. Hello. Greg, I'll have you on mute.
Hello? Yeah.
I can hear you. That's awesome. I was just, that's okay. Do you want to stop screen sharing? That's awesome.
That's okay.
Oh, that's good. You got the calendar.
Or
So I was, we
can.
can continue. No, that's good now. You can leave it up. Well, yeah, let's take the screen share off and we'll bring it to a close.
Absolutely.
Great, Greg. Well, I was just telling our viewers where they could find you. And my understanding is that you are a teacher both of Jyotish, Vedic Astrology, and Sanskrit, and that you also do private Jyotish readings, consultations, and that your website is VedicHealing108.com. Is there anything that I left out?
Well, I don't know. I just I don't know where the what I was saying got cut off, but just to finish that one thought
finish that thought, Greg.
Yeah, just that the idea is by using the calendar, over time we're bringing hopefully a little bit more harmony into our daily life. That's really the hope and intention of it.
Well, that's beautiful because we certainly that goes along with what you said, that your feeling was that in weighing that it can definitely be of some benefit, some knowledge of astrology, some benefit is to be derived.
Yeah, it's one step,
Okay.
a simple step,
Right.
but a significant one towards
Absolutely.
astrological awareness.
Yeah, and so right now you have this 1 month available, September, but you're going to be offering this calendar for starting in January.
Yeah.
And can our viewers find it on your website?
Yeah, it will be posted on the website.
Okay, all right, and awesome. So it's gonna be available for all 12 months?
I'm probably gonna start 1 month at a time.
Okay, all right.
And potentially, depending on interest levels, move to seasonal and maybe eventually yearly, just kind of depending.
Awesome. So definitely support Greg Poornamurti in this venture and this beautiful calendar. And again, check it out on his website, VedicHealing108.com. So thanks so much, Greg, for joining us today. And this is Noreen at the Healthy Peaceful Podcast.
Thank you so much, Noreen.
You're welcome. Hang for a moment. I'm just going to sign off the live recording, Greg.
Okay.